My new apartment seemed perfect, cozy, well lit, and nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The rent was surprisingly low, and I thought that finally life was giving me a break. But there was one thing in the apartment that made me feel uneasy: an ornate antique mirror that adorned the wall of the living room. Its intricate carvings and gilded frame held an aura of timeless elegance, but the reflection within the mirror always looked a little warped. In the coming weeks, as I settled into my new place, I couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in the mirror's reflections. Every time I looked into it, I felt very uneasy, almost as if something was watching me from the other side. Yet for some reason I felt drawn to it. Multiple times a day I would stop and stare at my reflection, not really fully aware of what I was doing. One evening, as the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I stood before the mirror, studying my reflection. But to my horror, the reflection that gazed back at me was different. I saw myself standing in the living room, but the eyes were not mine. They were dark, sorrowful eyes, filled with pain and regret. Startled, I stepped back, doubting what I had seen. Maybe it was just a trick of the light or my imagination playing tricks on me. I turned all of my lights on in the room and mustered up the courage to look again. I felt horrified as I gazed back into those same sorrowful eyes. I felt too afraid to move. I must have looked into the mirror for at least a minute before I finally found the strength to run into my room. I calmed myself and made a plan to take the mirror down in the morning when it was light out. The next morning, however, the fear was gone, and once again I felt drawn to gaze in the mirror. As I stared into the glass, the reflection started to change into something different entirely. It seemed to be revealing scenes from my past, moments of regret, missed opportunities and painful memories. The mirror seemed to feed on my guilt, showing me every mistake I had ever made. Overwhelmed with remorse, I tried to look away, but the mirror held me captive. It delved deeper into my soul, exposing wounds that I had buried deep within. Tears welled up in my eyes as I relived the pain and heartache. "Stop! Please stop!" I pleaded with the mirror, but its revelations were unrelenting. Time became non-existent. Days turned into a blur as I became obsessed with the mirror, unable to tear myself away from its haunting reflections. Sleep eluded me, and I found myself spending hours in front of the glass, tormented by my past. One night, as I stood in front of the mirror, my reflection changed once more. This time, it wasn't me I saw. It was some horrifying and grotesque version of myself, contorted and twisted. Terrified, I screamed and backed away. With tears streaming down my face, I felt a sudden surge of adrenaline. I clenched my fists and pounded on the mirror, trying to break it, but my hands passed through the glass as if it were an illusion. I fell through the ornate frame and landed in darkness. I stood up, shaking uncontrollably, and found myself in a completely black room. Darkness enveloped everything. As I slowly turned, searching for some kind of light, I saw what looked like a window. Looking through, I saw my apartment, and standing in the living room was the horrible figure I had seen moments before. I was somehow trapped inside of the mirror. In a desperate attempt to break free, I pounded on the glass again and again. The figure in my living room seemed to smile, and I fell to the floor sobbing. I'm not a very religious person, but I prayed and begged to somehow be released from this prison I was in. Suddenly I heard a very faint sound. I held my breath, trying to hear it better. The sound was growing louder and harsher. It was a scream, my scream. It kept growing louder and louder until my ears were in agonizing pain. Suddenly I was jolting upright in my bed. Had it all just been a nightmare? I couldn't remember ever going to bed, and I couldn't even recall what day it was. It didn't matter to me, though. I was free from whatever hell I had been in just a few seconds earlier. I got out of my bed, ran out of the apartment, and called my parents to pick me up. I never stepped foot back in the apartment again. I cancelled my lease and was lucky enough to have family and friends who volunteered to move all of my things. I still don't know what really happened in that living room, and I don't think I ever will. I still have trouble looking into mirrors to this day. The old doll had always fascinated me. Its delicate porcelain face, adorned with faded freckles and an enigmatic smile, exuded an unsettling charm. My grandmother's attic held a treasure trove of forgotten relics, and the doll was among them, hauntingly beautiful and mysterious. Whenever I visited my grandmother's house, I couldn't resist sneaking up to the attic to visit the doll. There was something about it that drew me in, like a moth to a flame. Its glassy eyes seemed to follow me, and sometimes I could swear I heard it whispering to me, beckoning me to come closer. One rainy afternoon, while my grandmother was out running errands, I decided to spend some time with the doll. I reached up to the dusty shelf where it rested and gently cradled it in my hands. A shiver ran down my spine as I felt a strange connection to this inanimate object. Placing the doll on a nearby chair, I sat across from it and gazed into its eyes. The whispers grew louder, like faint echoes in the back of my mind. I strained to make out the words, but they remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of my thoughts. In that moment, the room seemed to darken, the air thickening with an inexplicable heaviness. Fear began to gnaw at me, urging me to put the doll away and forget about it. But curiosity got the better of me. I needed to know what it wanted to tell me. "Talk to me," I whispered, my voice quivering. "What do you want?" The doll's porcelain lips didn't move, but I could hear a very faint voice. The whispers grew more urgent, like a chorus of lost souls begging to be heard. An overwhelming sense of sorrow and despair washed over me, and tears welled up in my eyes. Suddenly the whispers coalesced into distinct words, an invitation, a plea. "Stay with me," the doll seemed to say, its voice like a soft, chilling breeze. "Please don't ever leave." My heart raced and I stumbled backward, knocking the chair over. The doll's delicate face seemed to turn and watch me, its smile now warped into a malevolent grin. I couldn't tear my eyes away from its haunting gaze. Fueled by fear, I bolted out of the attic, leaving the doll behind. From that day on, I avoided the attic at all costs, terrified of what I had encountered there. But the doll's presence haunted my dreams, its whispers echoing through my mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked within. Years passed, and I had almost managed to convince myself that it was all a product of an overactive imagination. Until just a few nights ago, as I lay in bed, I heard a familiar whisper coming from the corner of my room. It sounded just like the doll's voice I swore I had heard so many years ago. "Why did you leave me?" it whispered. "I thought we were friends." In that moment, I knew the memory about the doll was no mere fantasy. Whatever it was, it had somehow found me, and I had unknowingly invited it in.